the, your
Okay, okay.
policies.
You've convinced me then, I guess. Sure. Mitchell, go
I'll
for
do
it,
the
of
quick
course.
rundown now while she's
Of
trying to log in
course.
because it might take a minute or two. So I had a really rough childhood. At 17, I was put into Homewood here in Guelph. I was diagnosed with social anxiety, generalized anxiety, PTSD, and borderline and histrionic personality disorders. Within a year of that, I was on the streets, homeless. And with welfare, or Ontario Works, as we call it here, the amounts were so minimal that I started to sell my body using Craigslist ads and drinking to try and manage the anxiety. And that continued for 22 years because you just feel so lost and so unimportant. It took 7 years to get onto ODSP because most of my disabilities were just mental. Um, and so since then, I've been homeless 7 times. I've been institutionalized 14 times. I tried 43 different medications. And when we finally did an enzyme test, it turned out that I reject SSRIs and SNRIs. So they would just give me really bad nightmares and things like that. My last apartment was an absolute dump in the basement, just a last minute grab, 600 bucks a month to live in a black mold corner in the basement with a drain. And I just had a futon mattress on the floor, and police were raiding us. My landlord knocked on my window with a machete. And it just really, it wore me down, and I became obsessed with MAiD because I just felt like I was a stain on a mattress. Literally, I was tweeting about that on my account. Um, and my friend sent a taxi over and said, "That's it. You're completely destroyed." Like I hadn't done laundry in 6 months. It was just I was laying there just wanting to die essentially because things were so bad, and I knew I was going to end up homeless again. So I did. My friend helped me out. I got into Guelph here just barely. My cat remained sick, and the money ran out for the medicine and all that, and so I had to put him down myself using valerian root and melatonin and injecting it in his mouth, and he passed that night. And that's when I had so many emotions, I didn't know what to do with them, that I threw them into advocacy. And so for the past 2 years, I've been going pretty much nonstop every day, sometimes 10 hours a day. And I started doing interviews. So I started with W5 doing the MAiD interview with Avis Fabaro. And, now it's kind of spread out since then. Oh, there's Elizabeth.
I'm sorry to thank you so much, Mike. That's what I needed was the link. I'm so sorry to be late.
It's okay. It's okay. But we should probably start real quick. It's really nice to see you. I'll just start
Yeah,
off right now.
yes, yeah. And
Hello,
you're Mitchell.
everyone. Oh, yes, I'm Mitchell. Nice to meet you.
Okay, nice to meet
Hello,
you.
everyone. I'd like to give a really warm welcome to the leader of the Green Party of Canada, Elizabeth May, and Ontario MP for Kitchener Centre, Mike Morris. I am Mitchell Tremblay, or ODSPoor on Twitter. I'm here to represent a community that is existent on social media of people who are disabled, neurodivergent, their families, caregivers, and allies who've been advocating for themselves because of the state of disability in Canada. And so I was wondering if I could ask you a couple questions about your disability policies.
Absolutely,
Okay,
and thank you for having us.
my pleasure. So the most pressing topic in most of my conversations is the Canadian Disability Benefit. Elizabeth, what is your plan for implementation of the Canadian Disability Benefit, or CDB?
To say it should be distributed immediately is to fail to express regret that this hasn't already happened. I have to give a lot of credit here to Mike Morris, the MP for Kitchener Centre, for having championed the Disability Act. I mean, it was federal government legislation, but it was very clear that the disability benefit is urgently needed. And it was a substantial achievement over a period of, Mike correct me, but I think at least 2 years, where we got every single party and every single member of parliament on board. At that point, we thought the disability checks would start rolling. The benefit would be paid out. So I can't express anything other than immense frustration that at this point, and in our pre-budget submission to Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Finance, we emphasized once again, probably the first time, that it's an unacceptable situation that such a high proportion of Canadians living with disabilities are disproportionately living well below the poverty line, and that this must be corrected. And the disability benefit should be well, if it's not part of April 16th budget, I'll be very, very shocked. But I've been shocked for quite a long time now that the benefit hasn't already started to flow.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it could involve backdate pay to when it became law, or start with some type of an intermediate fund like DERB, like the disability community's been calling for?
I think retroactive recognition that it's late is a very good idea, and certainly it could. I mean, these are all decisions in the hands of the Minister of Finance. I again will defer to Mike. I've heard nothing from any of the ministers or any of the government benches to justify the delay. Nothing. We know the benefit is approved. We know that the minister stands and supports it, and we have the support on all sides of the House, which is rare, especially these days. The Parliament is more divided than ever, and on this issue we're united. So a retroactive round of checks would be, I think, a modest step towards respect and recognition of an unacceptable delay. It could happen. At this point, I'm just wanting to make sure it's that the disability benefit starts being regularly paid out as promised, as soon as possible.
One more follow-up on that question. There's always going to be pushback on how we pay for this. So, Elizabeth, how will you fund it in perpetuity?
We fund unemployment insurance. We fund the Canadian public. We fund key aspects of our social safety net, and we don't treat them as one-time only one-offs. It's part of a commitment in our society to every single Canadian that certain benefits are delivered. And that's this in the same way. The question, rather than tying this to any particular source of funding, might be put slightly differently, Mitchell, saying, how do we ensure that Canada's finances remain stable, and also make sure we are paying for the disability benefit? And we also, as Greens, by the way, favor a guaranteed livable income. How do we make sure that we're also paying for the, which we approve, it's not enough money, the newly announced school meal program? The secret here, and it's not a secret, is to improve the reliability, stability, and actually the scale of government revenue to meet the current circumstance. Over the last number of decades, the portion of our tax system which results in government revenue for public purposes has been increasingly skewed away from corporate taxes. So corporations, there are actually the majority of corporations in this country aren't paying any tax at all. We also don't apply taxes on wealth. We apply taxes only on income. So to have our government revenues sufficiently robust that we're not in debt or deficit is not very, it's not complicated. It's where is there an excess of wealth? And one of Mike's motions in the House, which deals with excess profit taxes. We apply an excess profit tax right now on insurance and banking, but not on fossil fuel multinationals that are experiencing an unprecedented level of hundreds of billions of dollars of increased profits directly related to Putin invading Ukraine. There are many places to look for revenue. And we want to make sure as Greens that we know where the revenue comes from to ensure that our social safety net is not frayed, and it's increasingly disintegrating. We have a healthcare system in crisis, an education system in crisis. We have a poverty crisis, a homelessness crisis, and none of these things lack for solutions. It's a question of identifying where do you look for adequate government revenues such that you are in a wealthy, industrialized, and successful economy as a G7 country. Canada's got a successful economy and one that's got quite a lot of wealth, but we're not applying taxes on places where, for instance, wealth taxes, corporate taxes, excess profit taxes of corporations. There's a long list. If we go after those sources and we build into our system that disability benefit is a right of every Canadian who fits the criteria. There's no question. Do we run out of money? No. We don't ask ourselves, are we about to run out of money for a Canada pension plan? Are we going to run out of money? No, we make sure we have revenues equal to the needs of Canadians.
Mm-hmm. We calculate that the cost of keeping people with disabilities and legislated poverty is around $21 million a year. Because if you think 27% of Canadians are disabled, 40% of them live in poverty, and it costs $5,400 a month to keep somebody in poverty, or a year to keep somebody in poverty. So we did the math using ChatGPT and figured out it cost 21 million. So that could be, another talking point where you say, this is where we're going to save money, also through preventative medicine, if we could cover some of that and not be paying in the long run. So my next question is for Mike. One of our biggest fears upon rollout of the Canadian Disability Benefit would be clawbacks, especially after private insurers were allowed to do so in the Senate. Can you prevent clawbacks from the CDB on a provincial level, and how would you approach that?
Well, we tried putting it into the legislation, as you may know. We weren't successful with that, and so the only amendment we were successful with to C22 on this point is a requirement for the agreements between the federal and provincial governments and territories to be made public afterwards. And so the federal government has put forward that they will be doing everything possible to avoid the clawbacks that folks with disabilities have been raising as a concern all through the process. My hope is, and I guess it's justified to say, in federal legislation you can't put on a provincial responsibility, but we were at least able in the federal legislation to add that transparency mechanism that should there be any loophole that allows for that, that folks with disabilities will be able to see that for themselves. And hopefully that's a mechanism to create more accountability such that they will ensure that that is prevented. We've seen provinces already leaking memos, or the media has gotten a hold of, from two different provinces who've already, in certain bureaucratic speak, begun to muse about the possibility. And so we know this is a justified concern. And from a federal point of view, that's at least the starting point of trying to hold some accountability to push back on it. I was really disappointed that that Senate amendment wasn't accepted by the governing party, just as much as I was disappointed that they decided to cut it off at the age of 65. Mm-hmm. So it's not without its limitations, the Canada Disability Benefit. And so we're really working to move ahead with a measure that we know will help some, but not all, and at least see some measure of progress to lift up some folks with disabilities out of poverty.
Mm-hmm. Do either of you have a rough estimate of what the CDB needs to be amount-wise?
Well, it's not on us to answer that question. It's on folks with disabilities to be putting that pressure on elected leaders. And at the bare minimum, the disability community across the country has been calling, of course, to ensure it's above the poverty line. And so that's the bare minimum. We know that C22 doesn't actually list any amount at all. And so that's why I appreciate, to Elizabeth's answer earlier, it's, to me, incumbent on all MPs and all political parties to be using every avenue they have to put pressure on funding the benefit. Nothing will change until the benefit is adequately funded to lift people with disabilities above the poverty line. And so that's where the Green Party's put it in, the Green Party's formal submission individually as MPs. We've then been doing the same because we need to ensure that this is an adequate amount and that the eligibility is also sufficiently scoped for folks to fall to be able to access it, unlike the rumors we've heard about the disability tax credit being used, for example.
Let me just jump in there and say I've been giving a lot of credit here to Mike Morris, and deservedly so. But I want to thank the disability community and give credit where credit's due. What's in my head when you ask what the amount is, what the criteria are, is nothing about us without us. Mm-hmm. I hear it, we've learned it, and we know that looking at Canada as what I hope is a fairer country than it is today, that means that no Canadian should live below the poverty line. Let's be clear about that. That's why we believe in a guaranteed livable income. We can take that forward. We can talk about it. But in the context of people living with disabilities, also living under the crushing burden of poverty, that's where we've been really clear that above the poverty line is a minimum. And what that looks like for every Canadian, it will be slightly different from province to province, which is why our institution of a guaranteed livable income will save Canadians money overall. It will save our society money overall. But it's there are some governments that get to like that they'll save tons of money, but they're not paying for the benefit in the context of a guaranteed livable income. So I went slightly off course, but eliminating poverty in Canada is within our reach. Canada actually committed to this, although many Canadians don't know this, when we signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals under the United Nations. There's a commitment to eliminate poverty. Those commitments are not global commitments, as in we're going to eliminate poverty in Africa, but we're not looking at Canada. No, every commitment under the Sustainable Development Goals to which Canada has officially signed on to be achieved by 2030 apply domestically as well as globally. So we have a commitment as a nation to make sure no one is living below the poverty line in Canada. We know we can do it. We've taken multiple requests to the Parliamentary Budget Office. We've looked at how we can do it, how it would work. We've had champions right across the political spectrum to the idea of a guaranteed livable income. I happen today to be in Manitoba, which was a first province that undertook an inquiry many decades ago. They called it MINCOME because it was coming out of Manitoba, of what would be the impact on society if everyone, regardless of need, not a needs-based test, but everyone received a benefit that covered the just bare bones needs to ensure you're not in poverty. It's not, but we want to make sure it's at least livable and out of poverty. And then there's no clawbacks from that. That's really key, is that you build on the opportunity to be raised out of poverty so that when you are then back in the employment pool, you're back in where you are a taxpayer over time. And that's why you don't have to do a needs test. Every Canadian, sometimes people call this, by the way, negative income tax. Everybody receives it, whether you're Galen Weston or Mike Morris. You're going to get this. And then once you're paying, you're out of poverty, then your income tax essentially pays it right back into the system. But it's not a clawback. And it's really important that we get out of that mindset around assisting people, whether they're single moms on welfare or what have you. The clawback mentality keeps people in perpetual poverty and is not smart economics. It's also obviously not compassionate. And we want Canada to be the most compassionate and successful, healthy economy on the planet, and a country that tolerates any level of poverty among its citizenry is declaring failure. And it's not necessary. All around the world, there are many economies, many countries where you don't see people in homelessness encampments. I mean, this is a scourge. This is a stain on our morality as a society, that this is spreading and growing. So again, poverty is a crisis in Canada. It's particularly acute among the disability community. It's intolerable. It must end. And really, the question isn't what it costs to bring in a disability benefit. It's what it costs our society to fail to do so.
All right, my final question here. Many people refuse to relate new availability for medical assistance in dying, or MAiD, with legislated poverty. The lack of access to mental health or addiction support, the lack of availability of accessible and affordable safe housing. What is the Green Party's stance on MAiD and the aid required to keep it from being coercive?
I think we've been both very clear in Parliament on this. It's I will say very clearly that when MAiD was first brought in when Jody Wilson-Raybould was Minister of Justice and Jane Philpott was Minister of Health, I was a very strong supporter of death with dignity. The concern that we both have expressed is that if you extend, which the courts have said we must do, the access to medical assistance in dying to people whose underlying condition is mental health as a crushing and unbearable situation. I'll speak for myself, not against that in principle, but you can't create a door to medical assistance in dying that's easier to access than what I also call societal assistance in living. Mm-hmm. Where is the assistance to make sure nobody's in poverty? People aren't dealing with not being able to pay their rent, not being able to buy food, and at the same time dealing with desperately painful levels of mental health crisis without adequate mental health supports from our medical system. So you add those up, and it's really clear that it would. And I've also been, by the way, an advocate for access to psilocybin for people who are dealing with where psychiatry says we can't help this person. They're chronically depressed and have suicidal ideation at a level that means we can't help them. Wait a second. We're hearing from a lot of mental health professionals and from large scale testing, which and longitudinal and epidemiological studies that are showing that something like psilocybin can actually be a cure. The idea that we would make it harder for people to access psilocybin than to access medical assistance in dying is just wrong. Mm-hmm. So that's where we stand. We're not. We really. My heart breaks for people who felt like the access to medical assistance in dying for them was what they'd been hoping for and praying for through years of deep pain and chronic struggles with mental health. I'm not saying those people don't deserve to have an opportunity for death with dignity, but to open that door when we have not provided the basics of access to ensuring that nobody's living in poverty. I talked to a mental health professional, a doctor on Vancouver Island once, who said, she said she also supports medical assistance in dying, but she said, look, I have patients, and if you have someone who's suffered from chronic depression at a level that's severe, chances are you're not working. Chances are you can't pay your rent. Chances are you can't get groceries. And among many other medical professionals with whom I've spoken, there's deep concern that our society and our system is simply not prepared to answer the question with confidence. Yes, before we open the door to medical assistance in dying for people whose underlying condition is mental health, we've made sure we've provided everything possible to make that life bearable. And there's no chance of being able to say that the answer to that is yes right now. When we're back to the point of the first question, Mitchell. The disability benefit by itself is not going to be enough to answer that question. But without it, with the extreme levels of acute poverty being experienced by people in the disability community, how could we possibly make it potentially more attractive to seek MAiD than to continue to find meaning in life?
Sure.
Mitchell, I'll just
want to add something, Mike?
Well, just to summarize, to say that as Greens, we're going to both continue to call for the federal government to do more to help people live well, and that we know they have demonstrated that they can move quickly in other areas. MAiD is one example, and that shows it's possible for the government to move quickly. The disability community has been, I think, very strong in calling out how quickly CERB was put in place to demonstrate that a disability emergency response benefit could be put in place equally as fast. And it's similar here when it came to the pace of expanding MAiD, demonstrates that government can move quickly, and we're going to continue to call for this government to move quickly to support people in living well and for people with disabilities.
Thanks, Mike. Well said.
All right. So really quick in closing here, I would like to just detail a community-led campaign that I've come up with. Essentially, it's don't throw your vote away, recycle it to mean something more for people with disabilities through the Green Party PWD voter block. we're 27% of society, and that's 8 million Canadians. Now, they're not all voting age, but that is a voting bloc. We're the largest minority, and we're not being respected that way. And when I converse with my colleagues online, I swear 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 don't want to vote. They're refusing to vote, and a lot of them are going to abstain. So they're physically going to go there and abstain and say, none of you represent me. And so what I was wondering is if we could work together, and by pushing your poll numbers up, maybe 6 to 11%, we can show that this is a force to be reckoned with, and we get taken seriously. And some of the suggestions for that would be that maybe if Elizabeth, quarterly, you could address us, maybe a YouTube video or a letter, or say, like, you know, just reach, because no party leader is speaking. You're the first person now officially to speak with the disability community, and that's why I'm recording this, is so that I can get it out to them, so they can all hear what you have to say. My next suggestion: a disability platform added to the website with its own section right on that main page, because I had to dig through there and try and find little parts of it. But if it had its own cohesive spot that we could go to and get information, I would love to do some town halls with Mike on social media, Twitter spaces, Instagram parties, whatever, anything like that, and have people come in and discuss and say how they're feeling, and really just sort through this trauma of, you know, no government really listening to us. I would love to work on activism with Jonathan, because that's where our roots are. We both kind of have a similar thing there. Somebody suggested in the community, maybe you guys could have disability ambassadors, 1 or 2 from every province and territory, and they meet and discuss and say, hey, these are the issues that are most prevalent, and then we pass it on. And then, do either of you have anything to add to that?
I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm blown away. I would be very, very honored to participate as often as possible in community town halls. I will speak to the people. I mean, we don't have a huge staff team on our website, and it shows, but let's fix that and make sure that we're profiling our advocacy. And let's hope that we get to have on April 16th, when the budget comes out at long last, some degree of celebration for all the hard work of people in the disability community. Mike's hard work. We need to see the benefit rolled out, but that's not the end of the stories. And it would be a real tragedy if, on top of the other ways in which society marginalizes the disability community, if one of the tools and what every citizen has as a tool, that it really does mean there's power in each individual citizen, is casting the vote. To give up on that because politics as a whole has been disappointing and creates cynicism and despair. I don't deny that that there's an awful lot wrong with our politics, but we need to improve how we perform, and working together we can.
I know we're short on time. I'll just to say briefly, Mitchell, how much I appreciate the organizing that you're doing. Our job as elected folks is to stay focused on the needs of folks in our community, and that's what we're going to stay focused on. It's why we're so focused on ending legislated poverty for people with disabilities, and any organizing you want to do to bring the disability community together as a voting bloc is only going to give the disability community more power, and that's exactly as it should be.
And I know I speak for Jonathan Pedno, the other leader. We'd come anytime, Mitchell, anytime.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much to Elizabeth and Mike for joining me today for a state on this, for a conversation on the state of disability in Canada. Until next time, talk soon. Thank you very much to both of you. I've only got like 20 seconds left, and it's going to kick me out.